Disney Dreamlight Valley. As you can probably guess from the title, there is a lot to unpack with this one. For all of its many successes, Disney is historically terrible at video games. Former CEO Bob Iger once said on a quarterly earnings call in 2019 that we found that we haven't been particularly good at the self-publishing side. Given that one of the first things that Disney did when they acquired Star Wars was to eliminate the critically acclaimed video game division LucasArts, that seems like a bit of an understatement. Add in the fact that the developer of Dreamlight Valley, Gameloft, mostly focuses on mobile games, and it was reasonable for me to have low expectations for this release. However, this is a surprisingly entertaining Animal Crossing style game that draws from the incredibly robust Disney library, and I've really enjoyed what I've played so far. As I explored the different biomes and unlocked each character, it was obvious to see that there is a lot more content planned to be released. Like the huge, totally not Mario 64 castle, has all of these doorways waiting to take us throughout the Disney multiverse in future releases. That got me thinking, how much of the Disney Vault will we actually be able to eventually see? Now, there is no question that some of the content from the last 100 years should probably stay in the past. Sunflower the Centaur was removed from Fantasia in the 1969 re-release. I'm pretty sure that What Made the Red Man Red is only acceptable with football fans from Washington, D.C. And let's just not talk about Zippity Doo-Dah. Disney is in the business of making money. Well, maybe not the Star Wars part of Disney, but I totally see how things that may have been acceptable a century ago are not socially acceptable now. I can only imagine how awful things we do today will be seen 50 years from now. However, as I wander this empty castle and see the top floor, I know that the plan is to eventually release the big three of the Disney princesses, Snow White, Cinderella, and Aurora from Sleeping Beauty. These are all canonically teenage brides, with Snow White being the youngest at 14. I know these films are from a different time, and the characters are taken from stories that are even earlier. It's normal for a medieval female character to be married at a young age. However, Steam has a very specific policy on content that exploits children in any way, and child marriage is absolutely one of the most common forms of child exploitation. I know that for some this may seem a little ridiculous and over the top, but here's a Steam employee talking about this particular rule. If your product features this representation, even in a subtle way that could be defined as a gray area, it will be rejected by Steam. We are not interested in working with partners that dance around the edges of what's legal. For instance, setting your game in a high school but declaring your characters are of legal age would fall into that category and be banned. Now, currently the only romantically involved princess characters in Dreamlight Valley are Anna and Ariel. Anna's engagement ring from Kristoff is an item in the game, so that would place her at 21 years old, her age at the time of Frozen 2. Funnily enough, Anna and Kristoff share the same house, but their bedroom is not accessible. And here I thought love was an open door. Ariel, on the other hand, is 16. However, it seems that this is the pre-wedded version and Eric and her do not share a home. I mean, I totally concede how ridiculous it is to try to police fiction like this, but that's just the state of where we are. Mulan is 16, so she can't have kids in a Steam game, but Disney can thank Xinjiang Province for the use of enslaved labor in the live-action Mulan movie. Don't worry though, Disney did receive a strongly worded letter from the US Congress asking to explain their actions. And yes, I do know the hypocrisy of my using technology created from enslaved labor to complain about enslaved labor. Like I said, this is just the state of where we are. So what can Dreamlight Valley do? Aging the characters up would seem like that gray area issue that the Steam employee talked about. Maybe that was a one-off example. So here's a quote from another Steam employee. Broadly speaking, your goal should be to make a game that is absolutely okay, rather than submitting something that's over our line, then trying to work backwards from there to pare off the problematic parts. We aren't interested in helping partners who are trying to navigate that legally gray area, or push those boundaries. Do I personally believe that this game should be allowed by Steam? Absolutely. But then I also understand that Steam has been placed in a very particular position where they are basically using the laws of the state of Washington in an attempt to regulate content throughout the world. This is really not an easy question to answer. For example, in the state of Washington, where Valve is based, there is not an obvious bright line law saying X is pornography or obscenity and Y is not. we have to take into account a bunch of data points and circumstances, many of them subjective. I was actually curious to see what the specific laws about obscenity were in the state of Washington. Unfortunately for Belle, while she can legally marry with parental consent at 17, her interaction with the Beast would probably fall under assault depending on which of his forms we're talking about. Funnily enough, this is the same statute, WAC 137-25020, that covers an incident in which one or more of the following actions is taken or threatened against the staff member without his or her consent, or when he or she is unable to consent or refuse. Which is totally not what I was talking about in my Mass Effect video from last year. Totally. But that's the real danger, when we start pulling at the threads of what is and is not acceptable fiction. Eventually, everything can become prohibited. For example, I think we can all objectively agree that child soldiers are a terrible thing in real life. But I don't think that anyone would look at Bear Clan from Star Wars and say we need to ban the movie because it promotes child soldiers. If anything, it's a sadly realistic outcome to what invariably happens to child soldiers. I really want to see the What If episode where Yoda and Mace Windu are arrested and go to trial for their war crimes and any of the other atrocities they and their creepy Jedi cult were responsible for. Steam is not the only company feeling like they are being compelled to police their products for acceptable content. The trend of censorship is not just limited to video games. I've talked before on the situation with Visa, MasterCard, and Patreon, while Amazon is now censoring submitted Kindle works. We don't sell certain content, including content that we determine is hate speech, promotes the abuse or sexual exploitation of children. Under that policy, authors like Stephen King and Anne Rice would be banned. But so would the Bible, the Torah, and the Quran. I mean, I would love to play a video game about the life of Muhammad. It would be so amazing to see his pre-Islamic exploration of the other Abrahamic faiths. But I'm pretty sure no one would publish it given the age of some of his wives. Let's not even talk about how old Mary is assumed to be at the time of Jesus' birth. The whole point of society is to hold everyone to certain standards, and that's a good thing. However, there is a huge difference between fiction and reality. As I've talked about in many other videos, the safe and healthy exploration of sexuality actually reduces violent crimes and improves mental health. I mean, the evidence literally points to greater access to sexual content reducing real-life sexual violence. Video games with violence don't make us more violent, and video games with sex don't make us more sexually violent. There are studies that have linked violent video games with aggression, but every single one of them seems to have failed to factor for competition with their control groups. In other words, violent video games don't make us more aggressive. Competition does. Yes, we are going to be influenced by the culture and content that surrounds us, but if we are reasonably healthy, we're going to be able to separate fiction from reality. So, do child brides in a Disney game make society worse? No. Disney executives make society worse. Especially the board members who then go to Activision Blizzard and promote child gambling. You know, actual child exploitation. I'm sure Steam would be okay with that, however, as long as every character in the game that exploits real-life children is above the age of 18. Oh yeah, and it doesn't take place in a high school. Currently, this issue only impacts a small number of games and developers. As I talked about in my Evanical 2 review, the game was banned from Steam, but somehow Evanical 1 and the Evanical 2 demo are still playable. As the market for games with adult content continues to grow, we will see more and more examples of this. But how Steam finds a way to effectively and consistently regulate this matters as video games continue to evolve into something new. Is Steam more interested in preventing titles that have real-life child exploitation, or just regulate fictional content in a game? Should Steam allow children to play games with gambling in them? How about games with real money gacha mechanics? We know mobile developers are aggressively targeting children and will only get better at it. What is Steam, the largest PC game platform in the world, willing to do now and in the future? I like Dreamlight Valley because it doesn't have loot boxes and gacha mechanics. Yes, there is a battle pass and there is an energy system, but energy is almost effortless to restore through eating food or just going back to your home again. I'm less interested in how old Snow White is, or if Mulan is actually a sex worker or not, than I am about if this game is going to roll out standardized forms of mobile game cash grab exploitation. So far, so good. but hoping that a game that obviously markets to a younger audience doesn't start exploiting children with gambling mechanics is a pretty low bar. But like I said earlier, that's just the state of where we are. Video games have now arguably become the most influential forms of culture on our planet. I understand the desire for people and institutions to want to attempt to regulate them in the almost total absence of governmental oversight. However, it's important to have a public conversation about what we should and should not regulate, as well as an informed discussion of the potential zero-sum ramifications of those regulations. Am I picking on Disney here? Absolutely. But I would rather have this conversation about this rapidly decaying, bloated corporation than I would want to bring negative attention to an indie developer facing a similar situation. As with other forms of human trafficking adjacent ickiness, child marriage is a serious, real-life issue. Fortunately, the numbers have dropped in the last decade from 1 in 4 marriages to 1 in 5, but we still have a long way to go. That is one of the greatest things about people having access to safe and healthy methods of sexual exploration. All those real-life negative sexual atrocities that have plagued the human condition for millennia show an improvement. While it's not the solution to everything that afflicts our species, it makes a huge impact on improving the mental and physical well-being of everyone. This is why I feel so strongly about sex positivity. It helps make the world a better and healthier place. So if you love the Disney franchise, or if one of your flavors is watching a duck completely lose its mind in public, then I highly recommend checking out Disney Dreamlight Valley. Well, at least give it a shot before Steam bans it for content. I mean, this is a pretty open and shut violation of Steam's policy on content with child exploitation, and Steam would never treat one company or developer differently than another. Never. Let me know what you think. Your feedback and support has been instrumental in my growth and development, and I really appreciate it. At this point, all of my videos get suppressed and demonetized for content that is not advertiser friendly. I know. I can't imagine why my channel would be seen that way by YouTube. Thank you all for your support, advice, and most importantly, for believing in me. Especially big thanks to my Best Girl tier patrons, Bob Sellers, Xavieron, Lockhart, Trude Perkins, and Tyler Hunter. You all are awesome. And until next time, no shaming, just gaming. Thanks to all this month's support on Patreon. I wouldn't have been able to do this without you all.